What's the most fucked up thing you did in a sleepover? Story 1. Played with matches. For years afterward thought I'd burned my aunt and uncle's house down. I was staying with them. My cousin and I were lighting matches in the kitchen and throwing them in the sink to put them out. The head of one flew off and landed in the shelving unit by the sink, still smoking, but when we looked for it, we couldn't find it. It was the 80s, so all those "kids don't play with matches" ads were everywhere. Hours later we were awakened by my aunt telling us to get out of the house because it was on fire. Watched their house burn to the ground and was terrified to tell them what we'd been doing earlier. I just knew we'd done it. Carried that guilt for years. When I was around 15-ish, which was many years later, I finally told my aunt. She started laughing and after realizing I'd been thinking this the whole time, hugged me and explained it had been wiring in the back bedroom. I was an adult before I finally understood, after learning about how fire marshals investigate fires, that it wasn't just an assumption they'd made and could let go of that guilt. So I guess technically the most screwed up thing I did on a sleepover was traumatize myself for years. Story 2. Not a sleepover really, I guess you could call it that, but I was spending the night at my boyfriend's house, maybe 5 or so months into our relationship. I woke up maybe around 3 a.m. with what I assumed was a runny nose and my pillow was pretty wet, so I assumed I was drooling all over the place. Half asleep I wiped my face and immediately fully woke up in shock because the snot I wiped was really warm. Couldn't see a thing, so I sat up to go to the bathroom, and right when I did my nose just started pouring out warm liquid. Like it was literally just a waterfall of blood coming out of my nose. I immediately sprinted to the bathroom to get toilet paper, which woke my boyfriend up. I told him I had a nosebleed, so he went to turn on the lights just to make sure I was okay. The toilet paper soaked up fast, so I grabbed a hand towel. That soaked up fast, so I resorted to holding my head above the toilet to just let the blood spill out into it. As soon as my boyfriend turned the lights on, he saw the scene that was the bed. Everything was just covered in blood. My clothes, my pillow, the sheets and blanket. Just blood everywhere. I was super lightheaded, but the bleeding eventually stopped, and I was fine. We threw everything into the hamper, and for some reason my boyfriend just left it by the washing machine. His mom rushed downstairs in the morning yelling and waking us up, asking if we were okay, lol. We were both confused until we remembered I got possessed by Satan himself just hours before. Story 3. We were all like 9 or 10-year-old girls and everyone else had fallen asleep except for me, so I decided I would play a prank on them. I got up and shook a good amount of black pepper into my hand and went to several of the girls and held it under their noses. What I was thinking would happen was they would wake up sneezing and be like, "Hey! That was silly!" But instead they ended up waking up crying because they inhaled pepper, and turns out black pepper being inhaled into a sensitive orifice can really fucking sting. The girls cried so hard that my parents woke up and I had to explain the whole innocent idea behind my scheme. I felt so bad. Story 4. In Boy Scouts, I was the morning cook, meaning I woke up before anyone else to chop wood, make fire, and get water boiling. I grabbed the hatchet and start splitting a log into little splinters for kindling. It was cold and dewy. The hatchet slipped from my hand mid-upward swing and went flying to the tent circle. It seriously flew 10 to 15 yards and fell straight down through the roof of a tent, where 4 scouts were sound asleep. I'm not sure how long I waited to hear someone start screaming. I probably sat there in terrified anticipation for over a minute. Then I was worried someone might be hurt, so I crawled over to that tent where the hatchet landed. I super quietly unzipped the flap, and saw it landed in a bag of clothes very close to some kid's head. I snuck in, grabbed the hatchet, left the tent, zipped it back up, and finished breakfast. I heard them at breakfast complaining that the raccoons has ruined their perfectly nice tent by clawing a hole in it. Story 5. I got my first period at a sleepover, and lucky for me the first year of periods came with wicked vomiting and diarrhea. So in the middle of the night, right after everyone fell asleep, I destroyed my friend's bathroom with a volcanic amount of diarrhea. Then, on my way back to the living room where 5 preteen girls were crammed, I proceeded to vomit directly between 2 girls sleeping. I had to ask the mom for help with cleaning up the mess. Story 6. Walked home while everyone was asleep. Didn't tell my friend, didn't tell their parents, didn't tell my parents, just crawled out a window at my friend's house and crawled in a window at my own. Went to bed. Not a single person looked for me in the morning. Story 7. I bathed my friend. 2 of us stayed at a friend's house in our early teens. We raided their parents' liquor cabinet and proceeded to not understand how alcohol works. We drank every kind of liquor under the sun, very quickly, over the course of a few hours. We chased shots with popsicles and ate animal crackers to get the taste of gin out of our mouths. One of the 3 of us stood atop a small staircase into the living room. Maybe 4 steps, a few feet in distance. He swayed, grabbed onto the railing, turned pale, and then projectile vomited so violently that it all landed and splashed at the bottom of the staircase, leaving the steps clear, minus a few drops. He then immediately fell down the stairs and began to laugh in a pool of his own vomit. We picked him up, dragged him to the bathroom, stripped off all his clothes and shoved him in the shower. He had thick curly hair that was filled with bright red popsicle-colored animal cracker paste. I told him to put out his hands as he kept yelling to not tell everyone he had a small dick. Once he finally complied, I poured shampoo in his hands and told him to clean his hair. He slapped it all into his face, causing him to gag and his eyes to burn. At this point I had to get him cleaned up. So I did. We had no spare clothes for him barring our friend's brother's clothes. He was quite obese. We had to get a belt and tightly tie what I can only describe as parachute shorts around his waist. We went to sleep afterwards and convinced ourselves no one in the house heard us. If this story is believed to be untrue, the reason I remember it so well is because that friend shouting about his dick had a bigger dick than me, and you never forget finding out your dick is small. Story 8. This is not the weirdest thing, but something that has always stuck out to me. Had a girl tell me that she knew someone who masturbated by holding themselves up at the top of a door and basically doing pull-ups against the door to get off. She even demonstrated it for me. Then she took a very long shower, with a detachable shower head. She came out silent and out of it for a bit. It didn't occur to me until a few years later that she had the most defined arms out of anyone I knew at the time who was our age. I remember thinking that was weird since she played soccer but her upper body was ripped. Also, no one would make that up and say it was their friend because it was so strange, and she was way too good at it. I tried after her thinking, sweet a new way to get off, but I could only raise my body a few times. Anyways, girl got off from the corner of her closet door by doing pull-ups. Story 9. I was in the bathroom. I could overhear whispers, so I knew they were going to play a prank on me. I thought that the prank would be that they would unexpectedly break the door open while I was in there. So, to counter-surprise them, I decided to only pretend I was on the toilet, and to instead hold the door shut by pushing against it with both palms, adding my weight to the door and preventing it from being pushed open. However, that was not their intended prank. They thought I was on the toilet, far from the door. So their idea was to have a sword thrust unexpectedly through the door. The sword went through the door and then straight through the palm of my right hand as well. Blood went everywhere. The sword went in and out quickly. I have vague memories of turning the sink on and wrapping my hand with hand towels even while blood spurted throughout the room. I don't remember getting in the car, but apparently I was driven to the emergency room. It's now 20+ years later. The rest of my hand is fine, but I have a small scar of light-colored flesh on my palm where I no longer have any feeling. Usually when I mention the story, I just say that I was stabbed through by a sword when I was a teenager, without going into detail on the how and why, which is significantly more stupid. The same person who did this prank on me decided to prank someone else by holding a knife right above a sleeping person's eye so that when they woke up the first thing they'd see is a knife blade close up. Thankfully, that particular incident resulted in only a scream, with no physical injuries. Looking back, I suspect he may have been an unhealthy friend to hang out with.